In the heart of a sun-drenched valley in ancient Greece, a unique city was born. This was Sparta. It lay in a region called Laconia on the Peloponnese Peninsula. The Eurotas River flowed nearby, giving life to the land. This land was fertile, but it was also surrounded by high, rugged mountains. These mountains were like great walls. They protected Sparta from its enemies. They also kept the Spartans isolated. This isolation would shape their destiny. It helped them to become a people unlike any other in the ancient world, a community focused on strength and survival above all else. The story of Sparta begins long ago, in the mists of the Greek Dark Ages. Legend tells us that the city was founded by a hero named Lacedaemon. He was a son of the great god Zeus. He married a woman named Sparta, and he named the city after her. Later, a new people arrived. They were called the Dorians. They came from the north, conquering the land and its people. These Dorian invaders became the ancestors of the Spartans we know today. They established themselves as the ruling class, creating a new order in this secluded valley, an order that would be built on military might and strict control. The early Spartans were not yet the famous warriors of history. They were farmers and herders like their neighbors. They lived in small villages scattered across the fertile plain, but their position was not secure. The people they had conquered, the original inhabitants of Laconia, were not happy. They were now known as the Helots. They were forced to work the land for their new Spartan masters. This created a constant tension. The fear of a Helot uprising was always present. This fear would become a powerful force, pushing the Spartans to change their entire way of life and dedicate themselves to war. It was this ever-present danger that lit the fire of Spartan militarism. To control a large and resentful population of Helots, the Spartans needed to be strong. They needed to be organized. They needed to be the best warriors in the world. So, they made a choice. They decided to transform their entire society into a military camp. Every part of their life, from birth to death, would be dedicated to this one goal, creating the perfect soldier. This transformation was not quick. It happened over many years. But it created the Sparta that history remembers, a city of warriors, a legend forged in fear and discipline. The great change in Sparta is often linked to one man, Lycurgus. He was a legendary lawgiver. We are not sure if he was a real person or a myth, but his story is very important. The Spartans believed that Lycurgus traveled the world. He studied the laws of other cities. Then he returned to Sparta and gave them a new set of rules. These rules were called the Great Rhetra. They were not written down at first. They were passed down by word of mouth. The Great Rhetra was the blueprint for the new Spartan society. It was a radical plan to create total equality and military focus among the citizens. The core idea of Lycurgus's system was to remove all distractions. Things like wealth and luxury were seen as weaknesses. They made men soft. They created jealousy and division. So Lycurgus banned them. Gold and silver coins were forbidden. Instead, the Spartans used heavy iron rods as money. These were almost impossible to carry around or to hide. This made it very difficult for anyone to become rich. All Spartan citizens were given an equal plot of land, known as a kleros. This land was worked by the Helots, freeing the Spartan man to focus entirely on his military duties and the service of the state. This new society valued discipline, obedience, and courage above all else. The individual was not important. The state was everything. Every Spartan citizen or Spartiate belonged to the state from the moment they were born. Their life was not their own. It was dedicated to the protection and glory of Sparta. This created an incredible sense of unity and shared purpose. They saw themselves not as individuals, but as parts of a single, powerful machine, a machine designed for war. This collective mindset made them formidable opponents, as they fought not for personal glory, but for the survival of their comrades and their city. This radical social experiment was held together by a powerful set of values. Spartans were taught to speak plainly and directly. We still use the word laconic to describe this style of speech, named after their homeland of Laconia. They despised cowardice. A soldier who ran from a battle was the most shameful thing a man could be. He would be an outcast for the rest of his life. The famous Spartan saying was, "Return with your shield, or on it." This meant a soldier should either come back victorious, carrying his shield, or be carried back dead upon it. There was no other honorable option. This was the harsh, unbending code that forged a society of steel. The heart of the Spartan system was the agoge. This was the brutal and rigorous training program that every Spartan boy had to endure. It began at the age of 7. On that day, a boy was taken from his family. He would not live with them again for many years. He was now a ward of the state. He moved into a barracks with other boys his age. His life of comfort was over. His new life was one of hardship, discipline, and constant training. The agoge was designed to strip away his individuality and remake him as a perfect cog in the Spartan war machine, loyal only to his comrades and the state. Life in the agoge was deliberately harsh. The boys were given very little food. This was meant to teach them to endure hunger. It also encouraged them to steal food. If they were caught stealing, they were whipped severely. But they were not punished for stealing itself. They were punished for being clumsy enough to get caught. This taught them to be cunning, stealthy, and resourceful. They were given only one cloak to wear all year round. They had to sleep on beds made of reeds, which they had to cut themselves from the riverbank without a knife. Every part of their day was designed to make them tough, resilient, and self-reliant. The training was not just about physical hardship. It was also about obedience and teamwork. The boys were organized into groups. They lived, ate, and trained together. They were taught to see their group as their new family. They learned to fight as a unit, to trust the boy next to them with their life. They were taught music, dance, and poetry, but even these were focused on military themes. Their songs were about brave warriors and glorious battles. Their dances were war dances, practicing the movements of combat. Everything was focused on creating a perfect soldier who understood his place in the phalanx. As the boys grew older, the training became even more intense. They learned to use the weapons of a hoplite, the spear and the short sword. They spent endless hours practicing drills and formations. They were encouraged to fight each other, to test their strength and courage. By the time a young man graduated from the agoge at the age of 20, he was a hardened warrior. He was physically powerful, mentally tough, and completely dedicated to Sparta. He was ready to join a military mess, called a secession, and take his place in the battle line. The agoge had successfully turned a small boy into a Spartan. For centuries, Sparta's reputation grew throughout Greece. They were seen as the ultimate soldiers, the protectors of Greek freedom. This reputation was put to the ultimate test in 480 BC. A massive Persian army led by the mighty King Xerxes invaded Greece. The Persian force was enormous, perhaps hundreds of thousands strong. They seemed unstoppable. Many Greek city-states submitted to Xerxes, fearing his power, but Sparta refused. They decided to stand and fight. Along with a few allies, they chose a narrow mountain pass to make their stand. This pass was called Thermopylae, meaning hot gates. The Spartan king Leonidas led the Greek force. He had with him just 300 of his personal Spartan bodyguards. They were joined by a few thousand other Greeks. They knew they were marching to their deaths. An oracle had told the Spartans that either their city would be destroyed or a king must die. Leonidas chose to sacrifice himself for Sparta. At the pass of Thermopylae, the narrow space meant that the huge Persian army could not use its numbers. They had to face the Greeks in a small, confined area. This was perfect for the heavily armed Spartan hoplites and their phalanx formation. For 2 days, the small Greek army held back the might of Persia. The Spartans were magnificent. Their long spears and large bronze shields formed an unbreakable wall. They fought with incredible skill and courage. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers, including Xerxes' elite troops known as the Immortals, were thrown back with heavy losses. Xerxes, watching from a nearby hill, was said to have leapt from his throne in frustration and fear. The Spartans seemed invincible. They showed the world what their lifetime of training in the agoge was for. They were the perfect warriors, fighting in the perfect defensive position, but their heroic stand was doomed. A local Greek traitor showed the Persians a secret path through the mountains. This path allowed them to circle around and attack the Greeks from behind. When Leonidas learned he was surrounded, he sent most of the other Greek soldiers away to save them. He and his 300 Spartans, along with about 700 Thespians who bravely chose to stay, remained to fight to the last man. They fought with furious courage until they were all killed. They lost the battle, but their sacrifice was a huge victory for Greek morale. It inspired the rest of Greece to unite and eventually defeat the Persians. The story of Thermopylae made the Spartans legends forever. After the Persian Wars, Greece entered a golden age. But, this period of peace did not last. Two great powers emerged, each with a very different way of life. There was Sparta, the master of land warfare, leading a league of allies known as the Peloponnesian League. And there was Athens, a great naval power and a democracy leading its own powerful empire. For a long time there was a tense rivalry between them. Athens grew richer and more powerful. Sparta and its allies began to feel threatened. They saw Athens as an aggressive bully, trying to dominate all of Greece. This rivalry finally exploded into a long and terrible conflict. This conflict was the Peloponnesian War. It lasted for nearly 30 years, from 431 to 404 BC. It was a brutal and destructive war that tore the Greek world apart. It was a clash of opposites. Athens had a powerful navy and a great wall protecting its city. Sparta had an unbeatable army. The war was a stalemate for many years. The Spartans would march into Athenian territory, burning farms and crops, but they could not break through the walls of Athens. The Athenians would use their navy to raid the coast of the Peloponnese, but they could not defeat the Spartan army in a pitched battle on land. The war had a devastating effect on both sides. In Athens, a terrible plague broke out early in the war. It killed thousands of people, including their great leader Pericles. The war also changed the nature of fighting. It was no longer just about heroic battles between hoplites. It involved sieges, naval battles, and acts of great cruelty. Both sides committed terrible atrocities. Alliances shifted. It was a long, grinding war of attrition that exhausted the resources and the spirit of the Greek city-states. It was a civil war that pitted Greek against Greek in a struggle for supremacy. In the end, Sparta won the war. They managed to build a navy, with help from their old enemy, Persia. In 405 BC, the Spartan general Lysander destroyed the Athenian fleet at the Battle of Aegospotami. Without its navy, Athens could no longer get food supplies. The city was starved into surrender. Sparta had become the master of Greece. But it was a victory that came at a huge cost. The war had weakened all of Greece, and the Spartans would soon find that ruling an empire was very different from being a simple warrior state. The victory, in many ways, marked the beginning of their own end. While the men were dedicated to war, the women of Sparta had a unique and powerful role in society. Compared to women in other Greek cities like Athens, Spartan women had incredible freedom and influence. In Athens, women were expected to stay indoors, silent and unseen. But in Sparta, women were a vital part of the state's mission. Their main duty was to produce strong and healthy children who could become future warriors or mothers of warriors. To do this, they needed to be strong and healthy themselves. This belief shaped their entire lives and gave them a status unheard of elsewhere in the ancient world. Because of this, Spartan girls received a formal education just like the boys. This was managed by the state. They did not go to the agoge, but they learned to read and write. More importantly, they took part in athletics. They ran, wrestled, and threw the javelin and discus. The Spartans believed that strong mothers would have strong babies. This public physical activity shocked other Greeks, who were used to their women being secluded. Spartan women were known for their confidence, their sharp minds, and their direct, laconic speech. They were not seen as the property of their husbands, but as partners in building a strong Sparta. Spartan women also had significant economic power. Since the men were almost always busy with military training or away at war, the women were left in charge of the household and the land. They managed the family estates and controlled the haylots who worked the fields. This gave them a great deal of practical authority. They could own and inherit property, which was extremely rare in the Greek world. Over time, it is thought that women came to own a large portion of all the land in Sparta. This economic independence gave them a powerful voice in private and public affairs, reinforcing their respected position. The famous strength of Spartan women was legendary. They were known for their fierce patriotism. A Spartan mother would tell her son to return with his shield, or on it. They were expected to show no sadness if their sons died bravely in battle. Instead, they were expected to feel pride. There are stories of mothers who killed their own sons for showing cowardice. While these tales might be exaggerated, they show the ideal that Spartan women were expected to live up to. They were the guardians of Spartan values, the strong foundation upon which the entire warrior society was built. The government of Sparta was a strange and complex mixture. It was not a democracy like Athens, nor was it a simple monarchy. It was a unique system with several different parts, all designed to keep the state stable and focused on its military goals. This mixed constitution, as it was later called, was praised by many ancient thinkers like Aristotle. It balanced the power between different groups, preventing any one person or group from becoming too powerful. This system was believed to have been created by the great lawgiver Lycurgus, and it remained remarkably stable for centuries. At the top of the Spartan government were two kings. This is called a diarchy. Having two kings was very unusual. The two kings always came from two specific royal families, the Agiads and the Eurypontids. One king would usually lead the army in battle, while the other remained in Sparta. This prevented a single king from becoming a tyrant. The kings were also the chief priests of the state. However, their power was not absolute. They were watched closely and could be put on trial and even deposed. Their main role was as military commanders and religious leaders, not as all-powerful rulers of the state. A very powerful part of the government was the Gerousia, or the Council of Elders. This council was made up of the two kings and 28 other men. These 28 men had to be over the age of 60. They were elected for life by the Assembly of Citizens. Once a man reached 60, he was retired from military service and could be chosen for this great honor. The Gerousia acted as a court for serious criminal cases, such as murder or treason. More importantly, they decided which laws and proposals would be presented to the citizen assembly. They had the power to shape the entire political agenda of Sparta. The most powerful officials in Sparta, however, were the ephors. There were 5 ephors, and they were elected every year from the ordinary Spartan citizens. Their power was immense. They could overrule the kings. They presided over the Gerousia and the assembly. They were in charge of the agoge and controlled the education of the young. They were also responsible for the secret police, the Crypteia, which terrorized the Helot population. Because they were elected annually, they were meant to represent the will of the people, but their power was so great that they were often the true rulers of Sparta, keeping even the kings in check. After its great victory over Athens in the Peloponnesian War, Sparta stood at the peak of its power. It was the undisputed master of Greece. But this moment of triumph was also the beginning of its long and slow decline. The Spartans were brilliant soldiers, but they were not good at ruling an empire. Their rigid and conservative society was not prepared for the complexities of managing other Greek cities. They installed harsh military governments in the cities they conquered, which made them deeply unpopular. Their allies soon began to resent their arrogance and heavy-handed rule. A more serious problem was growing within Sparta itself. The strict laws of Lycurgus against wealth were breaking down. After the war, a huge amount of gold and silver flowed into Sparta from its new empire. This created a huge gap between the rich and the poor. The old ideal of equality was destroyed. Some Spartans became incredibly wealthy, while others lost their land and could no longer afford to be full citizens. This led to a sharp drop in the number of Spartiates, the elite citizen soldiers. Sparta's army, once the source of its strength, began to shrink dramatically. The final crushing blow came in 371 BC. At the Battle of Leuctra, the Spartan army faced a new and powerful rival, the city of Thebes. The Theban general, Epaminondas, used a brilliant new military tactic. He massed his best troops on one side of his battle line, making it incredibly deep. This powerful column smashed through the Spartan right wing, where the Spartan king and his elite soldiers were traditionally placed. The Spartan army was shattered. Their king was killed. For the first time in centuries, a Spartan army had been decisively defeated in a major land battle. The myth of Spartan invincibility was broken forever. The defeat at Leuctra was catastrophic. Following the battle, the Thebans invaded Laconia itself and freed the Helots of Messenia. The Helots had been the foundation of the Spartan economy for hundreds of years. Without them, the entire Spartan system collapsed. The number of Spartan citizens fell to just a few hundred. Sparta was reduced to a second-rate power, a shadow of its former self. It continued to exist for many more years, but its time as a great power was over. The rigid system that had made Sparta so strong for so long also made it unable to adapt to a changing world, leading to its inevitable fall. Though the city-state of Sparta eventually faded into history, its story has echoed down through the centuries. The legend of the Spartans has captivated people for over 2,000 years. The image of the 300 heroes at Thermopylae standing against impossible odds has become a timeless symbol of courage, sacrifice, and duty. It is a story that has inspired soldiers, leaders, and artists throughout Western civilization. The Spartans represent the idea that a small group of disciplined and dedicated people can achieve incredible things. This powerful image has ensured that Sparta is never forgotten. The Spartan way of life, with its focus on discipline, austerity, and physical fitness, has also left a lasting mark. The word Spartan itself has entered our language. We use it to describe something that is simple, harsh, and without luxury. The agoge, their brutal training system, is often seen as the ultimate example of state-controlled education designed to create a specific type of citizen. This idea of shaping individuals for the good of the state has been both admired and feared. It raises important questions about the balance between individual freedom and the needs of society, questions that we still debate today. We see the legacy of Sparta in many areas of modern life. Military organizations around the world still study Spartan tactics and their emphasis on unit cohesion, discipline, and lifelong training. The idea of an elite special forces unit, a small group of the very best soldiers, owes much to the memory of Leonidas and his 300 bodyguards. In sports, the name Spartan is used for teams and for tough endurance races, calling on the image of physical toughness and mental resilience. The Spartans have become a powerful brand, synonymous with strength, endurance, and a refusal to give up. Ultimately, the story of Sparta is a powerful tale of choices and consequences. They chose to sacrifice everything, art, comfort, freedom, and family life, for the sake of military security. This choice made them the greatest soldiers of their day, but it also made their society rigid, brutal, and ultimately unsustainable. They serve as both an inspiration and a warning. They inspire us with their courage and self-sacrifice. But they also warn us of the dangers of a society that values the state above the individual and war above all else. The echo of the Spartan spear is a complex one, and it continues to resonate in our modern world.